too. And I'm not gonna stop till I win.
Not Upendo, Milwaukee. That just means I love you. Welcome to the Nyumba Upendo Show on WNOB 860 AM 106.5 FM, the voice of Milwaukee. This is Kweku, your host for the next hour, joined along with Mr. Dan Debo and my man Jermaine Wright. A long time no see.
Well, you know, It seemed like just a few ago.
Man, it's been a minute.
You could have just carpooled in this morning.
Hey,
man.
Come on. That's what it should have been. Hey, I'm here on the solo tip because my sister, Dr. Alicia Mutri, she is out of the city. She is following her son in the NCAA tournament. So she's going around enjoying the games, but mostly just loving on her son. And when I talked to her before the show, she said, hey, before you do the P and Ps, she said, just tell every parent that I want them to hold their children a little bit closer and just to love on them a little bit more. I know this is spring break for a lot of the people in this area. So while you got your children at the house, if they kind of getting on your nerve a little bit or something like that, give them a little grace, but also give them a lot more love. And as I said before, I can't start the show without doing my P and Ps. And they said, what's the P and P? Was prayers and permission. As in the tradition of our ancestors, it is necessary for me to get the permission of an of an elder for permission to speak. I've been given permission to speak, and my mama prayed not just for me, but for the whole studio.
Yeah, we
this
got
morning.
some of that this morning. We got us some prayer that P and P this
You
morning.
got a
Man,
chance,
listen here, man.
You got a chance to feel it.
Yeah. I'm soon as, because I was in the middle of a conversation, but as soon as I heard that prayer start off, I cut the conversation and made sure, man, that I paid reverence to that prayer, man, because we all need prayer, man. Prayer covers everything, man.
That boy been raised right.
Hallelujah.
We talk about the Juju Watkins, the mother with Jaden Hayden and everything like that. And it's one of those real things, but it's like, and there's nothing like a mother's love. I got a chance to, to do the weekly article in the Milwaukee Courier. And I wanted to do a tribute for Women's Month. And it was a piece I entitled Swimming in Your Tears. And I was like, so many times, our Black women, they lead the way and they cry, but they hide it with a smile. And I said, so oftentimes it's like a swimming pool of life we swim in, and we living in the pool, having fun, stroking our thinking, but that pool is watered by their tears. And it's like in their sorrow, they still make sure we have joy. So it's always important for me to make sure that we, especially as Black men, give that honor, that love to our Black queens who go through so much. What Malcolm X talking about being the least respected and protected, neglected and rejected. We got to make sure that we let them know not only by our words, but by our actions. So for every beautiful Black woman that's listening, we just want you to know that you are loved, that we appreciate you, and we thank you for all that you do. If I had an ancestor to put this show under today, it'd probably be my man Charles Drew. And the reason why I say Dr. Charles Drew is because when I first read this book on him, he was this great athlete, as an all-star football player, all-star track player. But now we know him as the man who basically invented plasma, created plasma with the blood, unfortunately died in a tragic car accident. But that was that time where we talk about that scholastic brain, being a scholar, but also being very athletic, being able to merge those two together. And specifically at that time and period when he lived, we understood the struggles that he went through. So I want to put the show in this honor. And Brother D-Boy, if we can even bring our guests on the screen. Now, I cannot read this young lady's resume because that would take up the whole period of time. But when I tell you, you know how you meet somebody and you just be like, oh, this person is special. I got a chance in May of 21 during COVID. You know, everybody's doing these Zoom panels and whatnot. So you're getting a chance to meet a lot of people, work with people that you normally wouldn't work with. And on the panel was this lady by the name of Dr. Wilsa Charles Malveaux. And I'm just listening to her talk. And she's a psychiatrist. But I'm like, wow, she's got the ability to talk about sports, to talk about social justice, to talk about feminism as far as disproportionality, disparities that happen not only to blacks, but then when you do the intersection of blacks and women. And then, you know, you kind of start kind of being a snoop. You kind of do like the little stalker thing. You say, let me look and see some more because I want to keep in contact with her because she's special. And I started to look and I was like, oh, my goodness, like Charles Drew. Lettered in soccer, lettered in basketball, lettered in cheerleading, lettered in track, got scholarships for track and for track and for soccer. Then went to Stanford. So anybody, you know, when you talk about going to different schools, the scholastic aptitude you have to do to get in there is powerful. But what I really like about her is when she talks, when you hear her dedication to her family, to her husband, to her children. And you think about, again, what we talk about, these black queens who have so many beautiful titles, but have so much weight to carry. But the way she does it on a day in and day out basis, you just wonder, how do they do it? And I got a lot more accolades, but I'm going to just let those come in throughout the way of our conversation. But I want to welcome to the Nyumba Upendo show, Dr. Wilsa Charles Malveaux. How are you doing today, Queen?
Thank you so much. And I apologize in advance. My voice has been in and out all week, but I've been working on it to be in for this morning. So here I am. But thanks for having me.
No, I want to thank you for coming here. We had talked about you coming and just trying to get times right with everything that you do. So I appreciate the time. And you out in California, so it's 9 o'clock for you. So I'm really appreciate this because I had to come in a little early. So I know what it's like to be up a little bit before doing something that you normally don't do. I want to start off though, kind of talking about you just in your time in America, because I know you have parents from Grenada and from Jamaica, and then so being here. How was that kind of growing up in the States, and then how did that lead to your academic accolades, being National Honor Society, Spanish National Honor Society, and balancing that with an all-star athlete? How was that growing up?
Doing well in academics and participating in sports was not an option in our house. We had to do it. My parents are they both came to the U.S. as adults, but they went to college here and then both became doctors here. So they never pushed that we had to do that, but to excel academically, to do your work and to try to make honors, that was just something that was expected of us and kind of challenged us with that task. So that's part of the culture, just, you know, that high achievement. I don't think they expected what was happening with sports to happen, but it was fun.
So that was the bonus that came in.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talk about that because on the show this morning, we've been talking about, you know, obviously some of the signal gate, and we talk about some of the things with ICE and the way that some of the immigrants that come in here weren't given due process, aren't treated in a way that's consistent with what our country has said. So I think about that, but then always turn it back to when we talk about demographics. We understand how difficult it is to be a black person from the diaspora here. But then when we look at the quote unquote, you know, unofficial hierarchy chart, to become a woman in a misogynistic state is even more difficult. How did you manage that? Because being a student athlete is difficult in itself, but to be able to do that at a PWI, being a very highly recruited athlete, and then still having challenging majors, how did that happen for you? How did that work for you?
That was very, very difficult. I will say that. It wasn't something that at first I had any doubts about being able to do. Doubts did come in sometimes. Mostly that was because of other people who didn't expect to see someone like me doing the things that I was doing would tell me straight up they think I should pick something else to do. They didn't think I had what it took to become a doctor. They thought I should they don't know why they tell these athletes that they can do these things when they really can't. Balancing things with travel and academics at the same time had professors that instead of letting us take exams on the road or when we get back from competitions would make us take it a whole week earlier than the rest of the class because they didn't like feeling like athletes got handouts. I had to learn to fight. I really did have to learn to fight for what was rightfully mine. I remember having a professor once that I'd gotten A's on everything in this class. It was a sociology class. And then when I got my end grade, it was a B minus, which made no sense. And this person was actually about to be removed from the university for not producing enough research. But in her mind, this Black athlete couldn't be scoring this well on these tests. And I literally had to take it to the person who reviews grades. And they looked it over and saw all the papers that had been graded before. And they're like, this must have been a mistake. But I knew it wasn't a mistake because she'd already all but accused me of cheating before that. Because in her mind, it just didn't make sense. She literally asked, how are you getting A's all the time? And studying wasn't enough of an answer for her. So I had to learn to speak up for myself and keep receipts. And that's something that we have to do regularly.
I love that you had the fortitude and the self-advocacy to be able to do that. Obviously, you know, we were kind of playing about being raised right, but you were built to you were raised to be a strong person to advocate for yourself. I'm wondering, I'm curious, did that have, I know you went to Stanford for undergrad and then for medical school you went to Harvard. Did that have any kind of play in action that you saying, I'm going to go to a HBCU for medical school so I can get just fair treatment? I don't want to skate through, but I just want fair treatment, and maybe in places where I think they really care about me.
Not at that time. It wasn't a conscious thing. And Howard kind of became like a family tradition. My mom went there for medical school. My dad went there for dental school. I have siblings who went there for college. I was literally born at Howard University Hospital.
Okay.
So
That's a full moment for you.
It really was. I actually, when I did my OB-GYN rotation, the nurse that was there when I was born was on the unit. So it was pretty cool being there. So it wasn't a conscious decision, but being there and seeing the differences and experiencing that, it really showed me even more of the value, even though I had experience with Howard literally my whole life, it really showed me the value of that. And it plays a role in what we want for our kids in the future, for sure, especially given the way the world is and this country is right now.
And so what I want to kind of do is I didn't really give you enough credit as far as your athletic accolades and whatnot like that, you know, being on the junior Olympic team, the junior Pan Am games, and being a top tier athlete with Olympic aspirations seem to be a bit derailed by injuries. And it's a hard thing when your body fails you as an athlete, because not only is that your brand, but that's exactly who you are. If my reading is right, it looks like you went through about 4 major surgeries on your ankles where you just recognized, well, maybe this is not what I'm going to do. How hard was it for you as an athlete to say, maybe I have to retire earlier than I wanted to without achieving all my dreams? And then how did you transfer that into the academic prowess you had to say, I can stay attached to this and be able to help others in ways that maybe I wasn't?
I can be very honest about that. It was depressing.
Yeah.
It truly was depressing. At the time when I decided to hang up the cleats, the cleats and the spikes, my track spikes, I thought in the back of my mind, you know, starting med school, my teammate and I were doing a commercial for the Olympics at that time. And you put a bunch of athletes together and you tell them to run, but don't really run. But all of us are on the line. Everybody runs. So pulled my hamstring doing that. And I still hadn't that year qualified for the games because I'd already had the 4 surgeries on my ankle. So I knew I wasn't going then. But, you know, I was still youngish. And I thought, you know, there's another chance. I had interviewed an Olympic athlete that had trained in law school. So I thought, I can do that in med school. That was not the case. I didn't know how rigorous med school was going to be and how many hours I'd be spending both in class and also studying. So it wasn't until that reality hit that I really realized that it was actually over. So that was a hard transition at that point, because growing up with parents who were doctors, our godparents, our neighbors, it didn't seem to me at that time as something special. It just seemed kind of like, this is what I'm going to do.
Surrounded by
crazy, but that's how it felt. So it was a big, it was a disappointment, and sports had become such a big part of who I was. It wasn't really until the next change that was unplanned happened, which was changing careers from my plans of orthopedics to psychiatry, that I really had to learn the lesson of divorcing what I do from who I am. Not that you can't take things from what you do, but it can't be who you are.
Yeah.
And we're so much more than the things that we do. And that was a very valuable lesson. It's hard when you're a successful athlete to get that because you're so used to people building you up and everything positive coming from that experience. It's really hard to not make that who you are. But it's so important to recognize that we're more than that.
No, when you talk about being a part of your identity, because that is who you are, that's what you get so many accolades from. It's there. So when you return to injury, return to sport from injury is very difficult sometimes if you say, oh, I'm not the person. So to even get that in your mind, like, is this something that's temporary or am I going to get there? Is it worth all of the struggle and challenges? Tell me now, because I know you do so many different things in psychiatry, some with athletes, and we'll get into some of the other work a little bit later. But how has that experience helped you to talk with athletes today?
So much. I'm very, very, as you said, passionate about what I do. And I love what I do because helping other people to reach their goals, and this doesn't have to be in track or soccer, the other sports I did, like whatever they're doing, helping them reach their goals, it really does give me joy. But also being able to explain the feelings and help them to understand the feelings, understand the things that it took me years and multiple experiences to get, and breaking it down for them in a way that makes sense to them and resonates with them. That comes out of that pain. I really think that part of why I had to go through that was not just because it was a redirection to what I was supposed to be doing, but it helps me to be so much better at what I do than someone who's never really felt it, doesn't really understand it. Maybe they read about it, studied it, but that's not the same thing at all.
No, I love that you took that pain and it could have went left, but you said, no, I'm going to use this for a purpose and a good purpose for what we do. A lot of the times when people hear, oh, you're a psychiatrist, they think certain things. Now, we know that psychiatry is different from psychology in certain ways, but it's a Venn diagram. I want you to kind of explain to the people exactly what it is, what you do inside of your realm of psychiatry.
Absolutely. So a lot of times people think, oh, psychiatrist, you're the one who can prescribe. But it's so much bigger than just that. And as we know, in some states, there's even psychologists that have prescribing abilities. So really the difference, first of all, is that psychiatrist is a medical doctor. So we've gone to medical school. We have a medical degree. If we wanted to do surgery, we could. But this is what we've chosen to specialize in. There's a lot more to understanding just the brain and body connection. So that's a lot of the work that we do, making sure that whatever is happening is an actual, first of all, an illness. Second of all, a mental illness, a primary mental illness, as opposed to something else organic that's happening in the body that can be treated a different way. The way that I use my background, because I have a undergrad and master's degree in psychology as well, I really like to look at people as the whole person. I'm not looking for an illness, trying to over pathologize people. I'm looking to see what is going on that's impairing this person from living their best life. And for athletes, performing their best. So if they're having other things that are causing them to have anxiety or depression or leading them to substance use, for example, we need to treat those things to help them to get better. So really looking at the whole person is a big part of what I do, because in addressing those issues, that's how you get to your peak performance in whatever you're doing.
No, you know what I love about you, as we started to talk more, I recognize when we first met, it was a program, I think, sponsored by the Steve Fund, and it was through Michigan. And we were talking about sports. So you always think that people who are in sports, that's all they do is sports. And then you start to learn a little bit more. And you say, oh, you have a bit more eclectic nature in some of the things that you do. Because I've worked in the clinical space and counseling space, in schools, places, and whatnot like that. I want you to tell me in some of the spots that you've kind of worked in, because I'm gonna set that up for when we're gonna take a little break after you say that, and then when we come back, we're gonna come to the heart of the conversation. So just tell me some of the areas that you've worked in overall psychiatry.
Oh, absolutely. I've worked in inpatient psychiatry, both in community hospitals, major university hospitals, veterans hospital, community mental health clinics, urgent cares, or people who don't have any access to resources or insurance come I still contract with clinics outside of my private practice so I can still serve the community. And then, of course, there is my private practice and consulting work also that I do for sports teams, whole leagues, other sporting organizations, the Olympic Committee, etc. So I have myself in a lot of different places, but everyone needs me for a different reason.
Say, listen, Dr. Wilsa Charles Malveaux on the Nyumba Upendo Show, WNOV 860 AM, 106.5 FM. Make sure you join us on the next segment because we're going to get into the medication question. We'll see you when we see you.
Donald Trump is out of control, stopping payments for healthcare and food for hungry kids, eliminating the Department of Education, and letting Elon Musk access your most private information. Now Trump and Musk are backing Brad Schimmel because they know he'll let them do whatever they want. Not Judge Susan Crawford. She'll be the check and balance we need to protect us from Trump when he goes too far. That's why we need Judge Susan Crawford on the Supreme Court.
It's my time to shine. It's my time to live. It's my time to fly. It's my time.
Upendo, Milwaukee. That just means I love you. Welcome to the Nyumba Upendo Show. Welcome back. That just means House of Love. We're on WV 60 AM, 106.5 FM, the voice of the community, the longest running black station here in Wisconsin. I am with my good friend, psychiatrist, Dr. Wilsa Charles Malveaux. We're just kind of getting an introduction into who she was, just so well-rounded as a human being. But when we come into the focus of medication, this is for our community. This is where we get to get real, Dr. Malveaux. So that medication is always that sensitive question because we've been abused. You look at Medical Apartheid, books like that by Harriet Washington, and you see how we've been abused. And I think you even did an article for a place where you're the editor now for the what's the name of it?
Psychiatric Times.
Yeah, the editor of Psychiatric Times. You did articles in there talking about the fetishization of the black body, barriers to effectiveness, disparities within women intersection. When there's a medical industry complex that sometimes has used and abused us, how do we figure out the difference between good and bad? So the first question people want to know is, why do we always push medication? Why is that something that's pushed? And I don't want to say pushed in a bad way, but that's something that seems like almost the first option sometimes.
I think it's very important for people to recognize that they can advocate for themselves, first of all. It's not the first thing necessarily, depending on what we're treating. Now, there's some things, there's no amount of therapy that's going to change. If someone has bipolar disorder,
Yeah,
fix that with therapy alone. It can be support, but it's not going to fix it. If they have schizophrenia or one of the other psychotic disorders, that's not going to be changed with just therapy. That needs medication. In some cases, actually, therapy can make that worse. So I think that it's not so much that it's actually pushed in most cases. I think it's that we have such an aversion and a fear as a community that any mention of it feels like a pushing. But there are people, and there are still health disparities, there are racial disparities because of systemic racism that make some people just go to that first. It makes some people, some doctors and other providers pick more serious diagnoses that require those things when they're seeing the same symptoms present in someone who's Black versus someone else. So it's very important to make sure that you have a doctor that you feel like listens to you and that you advocate for yourself and ask the questions instead of, oftentimes people might go later and they ask their family or their friends or social media. But the time to ask is when you're right there because they're supposed to answer your questions, and that can help to get rid of a lot of that discomfort.
I think one of the hardest parts with that is that it's such a paucity of good black doctors out there, especially, within the MD realm. And so when you start to look at that, you look at a parent who said, maybe I don't know how to advocate. So let's get a little more specific with this. Now I'm a parent, and I know that something's going on with my child. I can't really see it. We use terms like neurodivergent now. So just for the listening audience, can you kind of explain the difference between like a neurodivergent and a neurotypical brain before we get into the question?
Sure. So when we're talking about neurodivergence, it's important to understand this is not an illness. It just literally means that the brain works differently than what we are using as the model for typical in the education system, people who are able to, for example, sit down and sit still and attend to what's happening when there's not a lot of activity. It may be deemed boring. Maybe a neurotypical child might be able to do that. Someone who's neurodivergent, let's say they have ADHD, they have this impulse to move. Part of it is because their brain needs that extra stimulation to stay alert, to stay able to attend to what's happening. So they might be in class moving around, fidgeting, not able to actually attend to what's happening, not because they don't want to, but because their brain literally works differently. And they need that help to be able to perform the way they need to in a school setting. So it's a different way of the brain working. It's not an illness, but it can be helped by medication.
So my question is, so let's say like we have a neurodivergent learner. There's a mom, there's a grandmom listening and say, hey, you're talking about my grandson right now. I know he's a good kid. He's a good boy, good child. When he played his video game, he don't got no problem. When he playing sports, he's got no problem. The problem is the school. It's an old structure. It's antiquated. It keeps these young boys staying still when they should be out moving. Why hasn't learning moved up to it? So instead of moving and changing curriculum and instruction styles, the first thing we go to is medication. Even though it can have a benefit, Why do you think that as a society we do things that doesn't help? And I'm gonna give you another one on the side of the parents. So the parents are blaming the school. The school would be like, well, the parents give them all this red dye 40. They give them the red Mountain Dew. They feed them this just diet of sugary information, and then we expect them to do this. So how can we get those two worlds together to combine and say, okay, these are some holistic measures, some other societal things we can do to change. But then if we've done these things, this is why you should consider the medication option.
Absolutely. So even for a child that has ADHD, you still should try the other things first. There are accommodations you can request in school. There are different coping skills that can be taught. Of course, the older the child is, the easier that is to teach. The reason why, to answer your question, it boils down to money and resources. That's what it comes down to. You're 1,000% right. Most times the school is going to blame the parents, not because it's the parents' fault, but because if the school has to take responsibility, now the school has to pay to fix it. In terms of changing the way schools work, it takes a lot more manpower, a lot more eyes on deck, hands on deck to arrange those types of activities. It takes more facilities to have those types of facilities. And it's definitely better to have them. And you know who does have them? A lot of private schools, because they know that it's better to have those things. In the public school system, there's sometimes mismanagement of funds.
We have been constant, so
I haven't seen everybody's books, but there's definitely funds that are not being used for that purpose because it's cheaper to have them just have their desk and have the teacher and the board. The reason why they're able to pay attention when they're doing their video games or their sport is because sports, they're active, they're moving. So that is helping them. It helps to get that other energy out. The video games have a lot of things happening on the screen at the same time. There's colors flashing everywhere. There's sounds at the same time. Right. Everything is moving everywhere. So there's a lot to catch their attention. It is extremely hard to go back from that to reading a book or listening to somebody just talk to you one-on-one, not even just at school, even just a regular conversation. And you find that people who are neurodivergent, that is another area. You see it in their social functioning because they're going to interrupt because they can't wait to get in there. It's moving too slow. You know, they're going to drift off.
I got my neurodivergent brain on this radio
you
station.
Probably do. Hey, there's superpowers with it too. Don't get me wrong. There are things that the neurodivergent brain can do that other people's brain literally cannot because of the way that it works differently, which is why it's so important to recognize it's not an illness. But I do want to encourage people, though, to use the internet differently than they do now. People use the internet to try to diagnose and treat their kids and be looking for tinctures of caffeine, of coffee, to give them in the morning, not understanding that that is caffeine, which is also a drug, except now you're not really controlling how much and what you're giving your child. Don't use it that way. Use it to take your informed questions to the people who have trained to know how to do it. And if you have somebody that's not listening, that's your clue that you need to find somebody else.
So, like when you talk about disorders, like you said, like with bipolar, schizophrenia, this is where you're having people who have heavy suicidal ideations, intention plans, having audio visual hallucinations. You say, okay, we understand why they can be put on a psychotropic so they can be able to adjust to regular society. But when we look at something like ADHD, especially with it being like a Schedule II drug, it's on the same chart with cocaine. It's on the same chart with those things that are highly addictive or have a potential for abuse. How do we reconcile that? What can you tell the people to say, hey, this is why methylphenidate or Ritalin or Adderall is different from hard cocaine that you'll get on the street?
Absolutely. So one big difference is the fact that nobody is regulating the people who are selling drugs in the street, or even, for example, marijuana is legalized in many places now. It's not being regulated. Sorry, my voice just went out there. It's not being regulated how it's being made. So you might be going to the same person all the time. There's so many cases of deaths, even in schools, middle schools even, because children are buying things and then it's laced.
That's what fentanyl, yeah.
Exactly. Takes out a lot of people. So it's cut with other things that can be poisonous. So that's one thing. But the fact of the matter is, it's been studied. People who have a need for stimulant medication or medications in general that don't get it are more likely to abuse substances than people who get treated. Why? Because they're self-medicating. they might not feel empowered to ask. Maybe if the diagnosis is found as a child and their parents were like, no, we're not doing that. Or if it's found as an adult and their community or family members are like, you don't even need that. So they let it go. But then what do? They use other substances because they know there's something that they need to deal with. So you're actually putting them at risk. And one other thing I'd like to add, we talked about bipolar and schizophrenia, but let's take it back to things that people don't see as serious. Depression, anxiety. These are also illnesses, and they don't have to have a reason in that person's life to exist. But if you don't treat them just like any other illness of the body, there's a natural course of disease, and even that can be suicide and death.
Now, I got a question for you. This is a little different than kind of what we talked about, but there's been a kind of an outside growing zeitgeist within the mental health field with some people saying, you know what, we overdoing therapy. Like this is not even really needed. Like people just got to stand up, quit complaining. We got to stop enabling them, making them feel like they need therapy. Now, this is what I do, so I know the benefits of therapy. I
Right.
think I can understand their point because I think it's some things people can do, but it comes a point where you say, "Hey, I do need assistance." Being at least you understand the purpose and the instructional knowledge and gift that a coach can give. But for the people who try to say that, oh man, you don't need medication, and even not just like saying you can just pray it away, but the people say you don't need this medication, you can kick it, you don't need no therapy. What do you say to them specifically, even though you're a psychiatrist? I know you're also a psychiatrist who also does therapy too. So what do you say to that growing sect of people who think that therapy is not useful, in fact could be counterproductive to growth?
Where that comes from is a stigma of associating getting help with weakness. So I bring that to their attention. But also with respect to athletes as a good example, because once athletes start speaking out about their mental health struggles and what they do to perform well, it became cool for people to do that, which is good. It gave people permission to be like, hey, well, if this person who I admire, who's so successful, who's literally the greatest in the world of all time at what they do, is doing this, then I can do it too. So it's addressing that stigma and acknowledging that it exists in our community that tells people that to get help is weakness is the first thing. But then for an analogy, if you were to break your leg and you needed a cast, you know what I'm saying? No, I don't need all that. I'm strong. I'm just gonna let this bone heal. I'm gonna walk on it. No, who's gonna do that?
Put a cast on my leg. I don't need
you want to fix it. If you're an athlete that's injured and you need physical therapy, you're going to be in that training room getting your physical therapy because you want to get back out there performing at your best. Your brain is a little organ and a part of your body. It's not different than these other parts of your body. So if there's something that's happening that's causing you to have mental health issues, emotional issues, it really is just doing a disservice in the name of so-called being strong to not address that like you would for anything else that's happening in your body. And I think helping people to understand that is important, and helping them to understand this is a part of performing your best. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's something wrong if you don't do it.
So let me do a follow-up on that, because as you talk about it, I can see people saying, oh, you know what? Medication may not be as bad as I thought. But what about, and you talked about this, you kind of referenced it earlier. What about the people that when they go in, they don't have a person they can trust, or a person who doesn't see them maybe fully as a person and recognize their humanity? Because you will see people on like these cocktail of medications, and they're taking something for the side effect, and then something for that side effect, where it just be like, well, how many things are you going to give it, to the point where almost a person seems like they're like in a daze? And I think what came in our community, specifically here in southeastern Wisconsin, where children were being drugged so much that they were kind of like zombies, and people was like, I don't want my child to be like this. So what are some of the warning signs that maybe the medication is not working, they need to do something else, or they need to see somebody else in that area?
When a person is prescribing medication, hopefully a physician, but not everyone has access to a physician. I recognize that. So whoever is prescribing the medication, they should be giving what's called informed consent. Informed consent means they are reviewing the risks and the benefits of the medication. So before the parent would accept, or the person would accept that medication, you should know and ask questions if they didn't make it clear enough. What do I expect to gain from this medication? How long is it going to take to work? How am I supposed to use it? And what side effects should I be looking out for? Both the ones that are common and the ones that are serious. If they haven't given you that information, then you haven't received informed consent. But that's where I'm going to not put the onus in terms of responsibility, like shame on them, but more so empower people to know this is what you should expect to have before you agree to something. And also the options. What are other options besides this? They should be able to explain to you what other options exist, but why they feel like this medication is the best one for you. If you find that your doctor's not doing that, or they're not willing to do that, that's your sign that you need to see someone else, if nothing else, for a second opinion.
So, Dr. Malveaux, that's a great theoretical answer. And I'm 100% with what you said. And in an ideal situation, I think that can work. But kind of like understanding the times we're in, where it takes 6 months to get in to see somebody. And then because their caseload is there, they're rushing people out in 10 minutes where they're not even really allowing you to ask the questions. And not so much because they don't want to, but because they're on this schedule pace. Maybe they're doing telepsychiatry because there's so many different people and they can treat more people. And it's just like this rush pace. How do we get them to slow down? How do we get those answers in those type of situations where maybe getting a second opinion would take another 6 months?
To get that, absolutely. So that goes back to what I was saying about using the internet differently. If you go, and this is not just for psychiatry, but also for your primary care, I encourage people actually to do this with a primary care provider. Whatever symptoms you've been having, whatever side effects you've been having, write that down and take that with you to ask them. If you read something on the internet or your cousin was taking this medication and said, don't take that because when I took it, this, and this happened. That's something to write down and talk to them about. Get the answers. Should I expect this? What's the reason this might happen? If you have that ready, it's easier to get it in as opposed to if you're having to think about it while you're there. And just to clarify too, for telepsychiatry, it's not necessarily the modality of telepsychiatry that can rush things. I definitely take my time with patients, but you do have to pay attention to the settings that you're seeing people in. Ask ahead of time if you can. You might not have choices, and I recognize that. How long do these appointments last? How long do I get for a follow-up? How long do I get for an initial? And also find out, do you have messaging capabilities with your doctor or the care team if it's not with your doctor? And if so, what is the expected time that I should receive a response? So you can utilize all the different ways to get the information. It might not all be in that appointment because you're right. And it's not because people don't care, but some systems just don't allow it. But you should know what the other options are and have those questions ready. Because sometimes a second opinion, it might be something that you read, but you need to have somewhere to ask those questions. And your primary care is also skilled at some mental health issues as well. So if you can't get to the psychiatrist, don't wait. Talk to your primary care provider about that as well.
Well, now, what is your thought on that as you talk about like the primary care physician? Also, like you talked about, maybe some psychologists who may have prescribing privileges or nurse practitioners. Do you believe that those individuals are just as competent when it comes to doing medication? Not without throwing any shade, but as far as like you say, okay, maybe I'll go to them as a second option, or no, these could be just as powerful or just as helpful in this field.
You are definitely throwing me in the fire right now. I just want to say that very clearly. You're trying to get me in all kinds of trouble. But I'll say this. Psychiatry residency, after you become a physician, psychiatry residency is 4 years. If you specialize in something else, that's additional training. Child and adolescent psychiatrist, that's an additional 2 years of training. Substance use, that's an additional year of training, all the different fields. If you are not a physician, the path to specializing in these different areas of medicine is not any number of years. So is the training the same? No. Is the knowledge base the same? No, that's just a fact. Can some of these people be helpful? Yes, they can still be helpful. Primary care physicians are still physicians. So if the question is, do I ask my primary care or do I go see a provider that's not a physician, that doesn't have the training? Ask your primary care first. That's what I would say.
I wasn't trying to throw you under the water. We just want to answer. That's what we do. I'm going to come back and throw myself under the water when we come. I want you to hold on for a second. Everybody, we're going to welcome Dr. Malveaux back on the second side of it. And after this break, the show is going to be over. So make sure, because she's not only going to give us some last gems just to put on our heart, we're going to do a recap of what we talked about. You're listening to Nyumba Upendo on WNOV 860 AM, 106.5 FM.
2.
Hey, 1-2-1-2. Kelly, take us home. WNOB 860 AM, 106.5 FM. I'm Dr. Kweku Amoasi, your host of the Nyumba Upendo Show. That's House of Love. And if you've been listening to Dr. Wilsa Charles Malveaux. I'm excited to have her on the show talking about these difficult conversations, because medication is one of those things that we don't like to talk about. Nobody wants to take it. Nobody wants that in their body. We want things naturally, but sometimes we do it. But Dr. Wilson, while I got you on the hot seat, let me go to another one for you. So, you hear the old saying, let thy food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. For the people who they're never going to do medication from that standpoint, they're just against it. What are some of the holistic remedies where you say, hey, I'm not telling you not to take medication. I do this, but if you're not going to do this, or even if you are doing it, but you want some other things that can help, why don't you consider these other things, specifically with the foods that we eat and other activities we do from a holistic nature?
Absolutely. Exercise is one of the most underutilized ways of improving your mood, improving your energy, improving your sleep. A lot of times, because of the ways that we work nowadays and people are very sedentary, we don't get the exercise that we used to when people had to walk places to get everywhere, or ride bikes or things like that weren't electronic. So getting more exercise can improve all those things. Like I said, your mood, your anxiety, if you have anxiety, your energy levels, if you're feeling lethargic, and your sleep, if you have insomnia. There are herbal remedies, a lot of herbal remedies out there. But I will say this, if you are going to use any of them, make sure that you tell whatever physicians you have, including your primary care, about them, because they do have interactions, some of them, with medications. So you might be taking something for high blood pressure. It might not be a psychotropic medication at all, but this can have an interaction. So make sure you keep track of those. And remember, it's still a chemical. It might be natural, but it's still a chemical. That's why it works. So you want to make sure you let whoever's helping you in your healing journey know what all the chemicals are that are in your body. Melatonin, some people use that for sleep initiation. It doesn't help you stay asleep. It helps you fall asleep. That's a natural chemical that we produce in our brains. But because of technology and the lights and television and phones, we naturally decrease it. So that makes it harder for us to sleep. So you can both behaviorally address your sleep hygiene, and you can try that over the counter to help you with sleep. So those are the main things that I would start out with. But again, just make sure you're keeping all of your healthcare providers in the loop about what you're trying, just to make sure that it's safe.
Hey, we got a caller real quick. I think somebody want to call in and ask for you. Did they come in?
Right.
Caller, you're on with Dr. Malveaux and Dr. Kweku. How can we help you?
I was just wanting to comment on the work that she's doing. And there's a drink that I make, and I've been drinking it for 30 years. And can you hear me?
Yeah, I was wondering what the drink was.
I now want to know what's in it.
Well, it's organic fruits and vegetables. And some fruits you can have, but they can't be treated with any pesticide. So I make sure that.
Oh, Julie.
I think we lost him. But what do you think about what he said?
Oh, there he is. I do have something to say, but go ahead. Oh, is he there?
Hello?
Yeah, okay, we got you again. We thought we lost you for a second.
Yeah, I know it keeps going in and out. I'm turning down my radio. But I wanted to actually leave my number with you to give me a call. I'm on my way to work. You know how they got us making sure we keep it moving. But what you was describing, I drink, and I also prescribe it to some of the kids because I'm a mentor. And I do fitness challenges down at the lake. And
awesome.
This year we're going to be doing that. So I just wanted to let her know that there is something in our fruits and vegetables that kids with these disorders that the doctors are, saying that the kids have. I actually know personal knowledge that it works. It works. It's all neural, and like you say, exercise is important. So that's why I implemented with drinking this as a daily. It's a meal supplement. Yep, and it's all natural.
Hey, I want to thank you for that. Jermaine's gonna get your number offline, and get your number, and then we can get in further contact. Dr.
Yeah.
Malveaux, as we kind of
Yeah.
close out, because Al Sharpton comes on quick.
I remember.
And so I
On
want
the
to
dot.
give you a chance. I want to give you a chance, honestly, though, to say, like, what are the things you want people to remember from the talk, or if they just got in here, what are the things that you want them to know specifically to be able to keep themselves in the best state when they do have to see someone in your profession?
I want people to recognize, yes, there's too few of us that are Black psychiatrists to be able to service all of our people and to be everywhere. So it's not likely that everyone's going to be able to see someone who looks like them, even though I understand that's a comfort. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other doctors who are good doctors that want to help. And being confident and verbalizing what you need is an important step to getting that. So don't be afraid to do that, even if it's uncomfortable. Yes, like the gentleman just shared, there are natural things, and absolutely, I'm glad he brought up the foods, the sugars, the dyes. Those things can contribute, but there are different levels for every. Just like with injury, there's different levels for different things that could be going on with your mental health, and there are some that will need the medication. So don't be afraid. I understand why it is, and it's not our community's fault. But even with that history, don't let that fear block you from getting the healing that you actually need to get when it's necessary. And the last thing I just want people to keep in mind for sports, especially for children, there's less access to sports in Black and brown communities. There's less access for sports for people who are below the poverty line. Like 30% of those kids participating in sports versus 70% of those who are above the poverty line. 40 and 47%, 42 and 47% of Black and brown kids in sports versus 58% of white children. But there's so much healing and resilience and life lessons to gain from those activities. So I love that there's communities that have activities going. We might not have the parks everywhere and the sports facilities everywhere, but we can move. And moving alone is something that's great for our mental health, including for adults.
Okay, this is the last question I'm gonna get you out on.
All right.
All-star athlete, all-star psychiatrist, all-star mom, all-star wife. How do you hold it all together with self-care?
Woo, I need to do better, but I'm aware of it. I know when I need to take time for myself. I take a break. Affirmations, having my playlist of my inspiration and comfort music. Music is dear to me, and reminding myself the things that make me me. Apart from those roles as a wife and mom and my job as a psychiatrist, that's all what I do. Yeah.
Dr. Malveaux, I want to thank you. Before Sharpton cut us off, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to see you next week on the Nyumba Upendo Show, Nakupenda, Milwaukee.
Thanks for having me.